Today is July 17th, and I'm going to be talking about Luke chapter 14. And so, first, I'm going to talk about something I found interesting in the chapter. Then, I'm going to talk about what I learned about people, what I learned about Jesus, and what's the next step we can take. When I'm done with all of those things, I will read the chapter aloud. So, in chapter 14, one of the things I found really interesting is right at the beginning, when the Pharisees and the experts of law ask Jesus a question, or Jesus asks them a question, and they don't respond. They're like, no, we know better than this. It's a trap. Whatever we say is going to be wrong, which was probably true. And so I just found that really interesting. Like, you're getting kind of mid-Luke, and they're getting used to Jesus's, the way Jesus talks and the way Jesus does things, and they're tired of embarrassing themselves. So instead of telling Jesus, no, he can't heal this guy on the Sabbath day, which is a day you're not supposed to do any work, they just let him do it because they know that's what he's going to do anyways. And I don't know, I find that a really interesting part of this chapter because you just kind of see the Pharisees slowly learning their lesson as they go through. And then something I learned about people is that we tend to always want to put ourselves first. I think you're like, yes, that's pretty obvious. We like to put ourselves first. But Jesus reminds us in this passage that we want to humble ourselves. So he tells the parable of the story of the banquet where if you sit in the front and then they ask you to move to the back, and it's really embarrassing. But if you start sitting in the back, that you might be asked to move to the front, and it's more of an honor. And that the idea that we want to look at ourselves and be like, no, we'll sit in the back. We will humble ourselves. We'll put ourselves last so other people can go first. And he even reminds that later. Like, I think that being humble is to invite those who are lower than you to come join you with things, to hang out with the people that you would not normally hang out with. Some people might say, oh, I'm too good to hang out with them. Well, Jesus is like, no, you're not. Spend time with them. Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame to your banquets. Invite them to do things with you. And that's part of humbling ourselves. And so I learned that as people, we tend to do the opposite. We tend to focus on ourselves and hold ourselves up on a pedestal, but Jesus is reminding us to humble ourselves. And what do I learn about Jesus? Well, about Jesus, I learned that he loves us very much and he wants us to follow him fully. But before we do that, we have to count the costs. At the end of the chapter, under the heading, The Cost of Being a Disciple, it talks about how we have to pick up our cross to follow Jesus. And he gives two examples of people who have to estimate the cost before they can do something. Figure out how much it's going to cost to build a building before you start. So you don't just have a foundation and no building. And so he's talking about this, and it feels like he's exaggerating a little bit, using large language. You have to hate your father and mother and stuff. And Jesus is being serious when he's saying this. I don't think this is him exaggerating at all, but saying you have to recognize the cost of following him. It could cost very little for you. It could cost everything. It could be your life is what the cost is. And so Jesus wants you to take it seriously, but not because he doesn't like you or doesn't think you can do it, but because he loves you so much that he needs you to take it seriously. He wants you to follow him truly and fully. And that's how we can have our best life. And so Jesus makes that clear as he's talking through this. And what is the next step we can take? Well, this goes back to what I was talking about when I said what we learned about people. It says that in verse 13 and 14, but when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. And while we don't throw banquets to invite those kinds of people to, we can go do things for the people who are in need. We can volunteer at shelters. We can help pass out food for those things. We can, like if you're at the grocery store and there's somebody trying to pay and they can't afford all of their groceries, we can help pay for them. We can go out and do those things and help the people around us in our communities. And that's what I think we're called to do, is what are some ways we can go and help other people. And so think about that today as part of your next steps. How can we go serve those around us? And so now I'm going to read Luke chapter 14. And it says, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. Jesus asked the Pharisees and the experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of the honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town, and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' And then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and the county lanes, and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." Until next time, you are sent.